Recording in progress. Okay, welcome everyone to Research and Statistics courses with me, Ibu Septa Miriana. And this week we will learn about new topic, namely populations and sample in research. So this is our outline today. We will talking about the sampling in quantitative data, and also we will talking about in qualitative also, and the sampling methods including non-probability and probability sampling, the types of sampling in quantitative and qualitative research, and sampling methods and sample size in research. So the first one, we were talking about the populations. Population, it's all the aggregated cases that researcher is interesting to examine. So, for examples, these peoples, and we want to know what is their maybe their height or maybe their body weight. So we take the populations. This is also the example. Researchers want to study about the stress of second-year nursing students. So the populations can be human, can be blood, can be organizations, and many more. So you can see here the populations can be from many regions. This is the maps of our world. So that's the populations of our world. So population also have many terms. The first one is accessible. The accessible is we can access the subject to become our subject in research. The second one is target populations. It aggregate cases that to be generalized. So for the example, target population is all second-year nursing students in Indonesia. That's the populations. And accessible populations is second-year nursing students in UPH. So the accessible population is we can access that populations. So maybe you can give one example from this picture. What is target populations and what is accessible populations? And you must to think about the topic you want to study. Please think. We were talking also in populations, we are talking about the eligibility criteria. So who can be included and who can be excluded in the study? So you must consider some issues, including the first one is cost. Do researchers need to spend more cost to take out the subject? No, right? So we must consider subject with affordable efforts. The second one is practical concerns. We must consider about the vulnerability of the subjects. Maybe example is for the pregnant woman, for the children. The subject ability. Think about their health. Maybe patient in ICU room, patient with the mental health. The fourth one is design considerations. So we were talking about the homogeneous populations. The homogeneous population is how the characteristics of our subject is homogeneous. For example, most of them is nursing students. They are in the second year. They are in the same origin from the same island. So that is homogeneous. Okay, so you must consider these things. So the eligibility criteria will be saying in our research as including criteria, inclusion criteria, and exclusion criteria. This is the example from one of the research from Patino and Ferreira 2018. This one, the inclusion criteria, you can also click for the links. I already put the link here. You can easily look at the paper. The inclusion criteria will be adults above 40 years old, will be diagnosed of COPD at least for 1 year, at least have one spirometry at last year with post-bronchodilator, current or former smokers, so previously the patient will be smoke, and in the stable conditions. They will exclude patient with diagnosis of sleep apnea or another chronic respiratory disease, any acute chronic condition will limit the ability to participate the study and refuse the informed consent. So please note here that the exclusion criteria is not the antonym of the inclusion criteria. For the example, the researcher said adults above 40 years old. The exclusion criteria not be adults under 40 years old, not like that. So the exclusion criteria is not the antonym of the inclusion criteria. So you already understand about the population. Now we're talking about the sample and the sampling. So the red people here is the populations, and we take the samples. For example, we take 1 as the sample. So the sample is the subset of the populations, and the sample must represent the population. Must represent the population. Sampling is the method to select the sample. How we select the sample? Divided by probability and non-probability sampling. So if we use the wrong sampling method, it will lead to sample bias, and it will make the sample unable to represent the population. So the first one, we're talking about the non-probability. So the non-probability is non-random. It consists of 3 main sampling. The first one is convenience. So you can see here the picture is convenience. So researchers use most convenience methods to recruit the sample. For example, she stopped the people in the street and asked and interviewed them. That is the convenience way. The second one is the quota sampling. The quota sampling is researcher determine how many samples are taken from each stratum. For the example, in nursing students ATP 2023, they have 8 GP, right? For the example. So we take 10 for the GP1, 10 for the GP2. So every stratum, every group have the quota. The last one is purposive sampling or judgmental sampling. It is based on the researcher's knowledge or belief, usually utilized in Delphi study. So Delphi study is about we ask the experts, and it's about the expert study. For the undergraduate students, we rarely use this method. And non-probability sampling, you can see here, for convenience sampling, we also have snowball sampling or network sampling. What does it mean? That means that early sampling, the previous sample we use, they refer to other people. So convenience sampling usually say as the weakest method. The quota sampling, this is the example here. The quota sampling, we take the quota from the stratum. So this is the populations, male is 200, female is 800. So we take 20% of them. So 20% of 200 is 40, and 80% of 800 is 160. That is quota sampling. And you can see here the convenience is just only convenience for the researcher. For purposive sampling, this is the example. The Friedemann, Montgomery, and Price and Farrell studied about family member involvement in the nursing home. So they asked about sampling 24 nursing homes. Yet it's from the experts. We rarely use the purposive sampling. And for the probability sampling, previously we already learned about the non-probability. Now we learn about the probability. The probability, we select our sample in random. It consists of 4. The first one is simple random sampling. The simple random sampling is the very basic of random sampling. For the example, from 50 students, we take 20 students with randomly. So it's very random. In stratified random sampling, we take subject randomly from every strata. So for example, we have 50 students and we divided them into 5 groups, and we take randomly from every strata. Cluster sampling, we randomly select all sample from all cluster become the sample. Later I will explain to you by picture. And the systematic sampling, we take every case from the listing groups. For example, every number 10 for 100 people. Okay. So this is the picture of the probability or random sampling. This is random sampling. We randomly take the sample and stratify from few population. You take two as randomly, and more population you take more sample and it is randomly. For systematic, like I said before, it's K. You take maybe this one is 1 and then you skip 2% and then you skip 2%. And cluster, you maybe take 1 or maybe you take all. So that is cluster sampling. So in quantitative study, what kind of sample we can use, right? That's the questions. The first one, it must representative of the populations. A large sample does not always ensure the representations. How if you take the wrong sample? So you must use the sampling method very careful. And we also talking about the power analysis can be used to determine the sample size. So the power mean is the power of the study. The power is increasing when we increase the sample size. Okay, so if we increase the sample size, it will be increase the power of the study. It will be represent the populations. That's the meaning of the power. And consider this. The first one is homogeneity. If the characteristics is homogeneous, like I said before, they are nursing students, they are in the second year, they are in the same islands, for the example, you can use small sample size because the population is homogeneous. The effect size. The effect size is the relationship between independent variable and dependent variable. If the previous study mentioned about that, the small sample size is enough because we already know what's their relationship. And the last one is the measurements, the questionnaire, the tools we use to measure our variable. So when we use biopsychologic, like blood maybe, the measurements are sensitive. So they maybe use the small sample size. But if we use psychosocials like nursing, like a study, we measure stress or we measure maybe the motivations. So we need a large size. So this is the step of samplings in quantitative study. We identify the population first. We make the inclusion and exclusion criteria. We specify the sampling method we use, and we ask the patient to participate in our study. So sample determinations, how we determine the sample size, right? So we can use two kinds of formula. The first one is the existing rules. And the last one is power analysis, like I already said before. We use effect size, sample, and p-level. The first one is existing rules. Many study use this. The first one is sample to item ratio. The ratio should not be less than 5:1. What that mean? That mean is one item questionnaire needs 5 participants. So for example, we have 30 item questionnaires, 30 item of questions in our scale. So we multiply 30 to 5. So 30 to 5 is 150. That's the very basic. The second one, sample to variable. So this is, you can use 5, 15, or 20 sample for one observations. For the example, we have 5 independent variables. We want to study about the motivation to study. So independent variables will be maybe the GPA, the gender, and a lot. So how many the independent variables will be multiplied by 5 or 15 or 20? This one, we have 5 and we will multiply by 15. So we need 75. For the Krejcik and Morgan table, the KMT 170. This one is the link you can see here later on. So the table already provide exact sample for how many populations. The calculator also, I already put here the link. You can use that and you can easily put the effect size, the population, and you easily find the sample size. For the famous existing rules in nursing, especially in Indonesia, we use Slovene formula. So this is the equations, the formula n, small n is meaning sample size, populations per 1 plus total populations with error tolerance. For example, this one, we have population 1,000 people, and we give confidence level of 95%, and we give the alpha level is 0.05. So the n, you put the formula, and then 1,000 per 1 plus 1,000 multiplied by 0.05, and this one is squared, and you have 285.71, and you just put it 286. So this is the Slovene formula. You can usually use that if you know how many is your populations. Sample determination by power analysis. This we use usually we use G power. So person who introduced this is Cohen in 1988. We use effect size, the relationship between independent variable and dependent variable. Usually we have 3 categories of the effect size: 0.02, 0.15, and 0.35. And usually we use medium effect size. The level significance, we use 0.05, like in nursing usually use the 0.05, and we just put that in G power. So this is the G power. You also can watch that, how you put the effect size, the power, number of predictors here you can put, and you can get the total sample size here is 77. But you must know what kind of test family you use and statistical test you use. This is the link you can watch there and how to determine your sample size. So that's all for the quantitative study. Now you already know how to determine your sample, how to choose your sample from your population. Right now we're going to the qualitative study. In qualitative study, we always use small and non-random sampling. Okay, so qualitative study is searching for the meaning, not the generalizability. We looking for the meaning, what they say about what you ask. So it's not about the number, it's about the quality, like the name. The sampling method in the qualitative, usually we use convenience because it's convenience. We ask who can be volunteer become sample. The snowball, the early sample make referrals. Okay. The purposive, we handpicking the sample, we ask them. And theoretical, usually theoretical is for the grounded theory design. Okay, the sample size, there is no strict criteria or rule for sample size in qualitative study, but the most commonly used approach is the data saturation. Data saturation means there no new informations come from the new participants. So for the type, for the ethnography method, we use 20 or 50 informants because it's ethnography study. For Indonesian study, we use usually phenomenological, we use 10 or fewer, and grounded theory, we use 20 and 30. So that's all for the population and sample size. So this is the discussion activity. You can read here and also you can answer that, and please put in the forum discussion in Learn. That's all. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your participations. This is the reference of our study in this week. Hopefully you can understand, and if you cannot understand, please re-watch this video and you can ask in our class. Thank you all. God bless you.